How was your weekend?
Weekend.
Where'd
I
you
know
go?
it was good.
Where'd you go?
Um, Went to 2 hockey games. Where did they play this week? They were on the road. Oh, Saginaw,
It was
London.
London,
Saginaw.
Okay, that was
London,
special.
Saginaw. Yeah. How was it? It was good. It was good. It was good, but man, I know.
Go ahead.
No, it was good. No, it was good.
What are your thoughts? What are your
You know what? Like, because I always say this. I'm a Guelph Storm fan, right? Because that's my kid, and it's just when when you're just young and um, here's the thing, they're young and they're rebuilding, and and they're competing like 5-on-5. They compete with anybody, and then the young mistakes will cost them games. And it's just a couple minutes here and there, and then it's gone. Like they hang with the best teams. They should win most. Like I should say should win most of their games, but they're in most of the games. They're right in there. They've outplayed so many teams, and it's just like when you're a young team, you find a way to lose. So it was kind of frustrating in that way. The next game against Saginaw was just they lost on penalties. You played a power play team. Saginaw is just like high skilled power play team, right? So same with London, really. But and you play those teams, you don't want to be in the box, obviously, right? You're playing to their strengths, so that's what they did, and that's what cost them the game and stuff like that. But their kids are playing good. It's just youth. The youth is it's some those lapses are hard to watch,
Is it okay?
but it's fine.
You know how people talk about older team? We always say this: older teams, the experience and all that is better. Is it the part of being a young team that costs you? Is it that they make mistakes that an older player won't make? Is that the biggest difference, or is it they're like behind a step, or their timing isn't as good, or all of the
Sidney
above?
Crosby was in they put a post about 2 weeks ago how he's has the most NHL faceoffs in the history of hockey, and it's
Oh, wow, really?
15,000 whatever
Cool stat.
faceoffs. It's something like that. I think Mac. Did you see that one, Mac? Anyways,
Really?
they
You
posted
didn't
that
see
he's
that
got
one?
the most faceoffs in history. Yeah, I broke the
Just
record for
broke
the
the
most face. I think it's 15,000 or 18,000 faceoffs.
Wow.
Yeah. So right.
Mac
So
knows.
it's a way of answering your question. Is like if you take a face-off against Sidney Crosby, he's probably going to win. Even if you've taken 10,000, he's taken 5,000 more at the NHL level. So experience does make a huge difference. So when a defenseman is going in the OHL, let's say, and you're 17 or 16 as opposed to 21, or 20, a 20-year-old has probably been beaten down in his head when he's going to retrieve pucks or going to battles. You can finish your hit, yeah, but don't have your stick up in the air, because if you hit the guy that can knock a puck out, and you haven't done anything with the puck, right? You eliminated only one threat. So a 21-year-old or a 20-year-old is going to go in there and knock a puck away and take the body. I'm using that as one example.
It's a little
right?
details.
Yeah, it's maybe picking your spots, when to pinch, picking your spots, when to understand the game, when to dump it in, how to manage it and stuff like that. And then just the age. I mean, if you give me if we're going to play a game and we play and you give me 20 19-year-olds and you get the 17-year-olds, the 19-year-old should win. Like, this is just the bottom line. So yeah, it's experience, it's experience, it's strength, it's you get better. What you will blow your mind, and you guys have coached. Sorry, we got a little bit of a crowd here. Some of our coaches from
Our
Bio
biggest
still
fans
here.
are here watching.
But when you coach, I remember watching. Well, when I coached, you'd see. Like, when I remember coaching, let's say it was when I was coaching Bell Tire. We were that first year we were U14, and we saw the U15s on before or after us. And you just
like your older teams?
yeah,
Bell Tire?
and you just go, geez, these kids are big. It's only 1 year. I remember watching my son grow up, and when they were in Pee Wee going into Bantam, you go, God, the kids a year older are so much bigger. And then the next year, your kids are the exact same. And I remember in my son's draft year, how I was looking at the kids that were 6 feet tall that in minor midget. It's like, it seems like it's impossible, right? Seems impossible.
Man,
But then a year comes and your kid is 6'1".
I have a vivid memory
and you look huge. Yeah.
that of going to one of their Windsor AAA games when they were like 13. I vividly remember this. We were here, and it was on the other side there where they come out after the games, and little Chooch comes out with his dress shoes, and I remember vividly noticing, I'm like, man, he's getting tall. Like, wow, he's getting tall. And now he's like 6'2", he's like taller than me. And it was like boom, overnight. Like you can see how fast it goes from like 14 to 15 to 16 to 17. It's like holy, like what is going on? You see it with some of these kids too, right?
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
And
pretty wild.
so my point to that is every year, like as junior and pro level, like 1 year, you wouldn't think it makes that much of a difference, but that 1 year of experience, a kid coming back from a pro camp. So that's another thing. So you got a kid that plays junior, kid that plays junior for 2 years, kid that plays junior for 2 or 3 years that has been to a pro camp or two. You can't even explain the experience that a kid like that gets.
So
It's crazy.
one of the I think a interesting thing to notice is the physical growth. Like let's say you hit 18-ish, most men are not growing a ton more past 18, 19, 20-ish, right? But the mental development and like the skill set development keeps going. So like the gap physically might not be as wide between like 16 to 17, 17 to 18, 18 to 19 because everyone's kind of
As
hitting
far as
their
growth,
as far as just physical, their height, their weight a little bit, but like you're not going from when you're a teenager, you might put on like 20 pounds over a few months in the summertime, whereas from 19 to 20, you're probably not going to do that, right? So typically, you're kind of plateauing in physical growth around that 19-ish, but how you play will still continue. Like what do you call somebody's prime in the NHL? Like 24, 25,
I think
26,
I think they
27?
said it's 24, 25, or maybe or exactly what you said, 24, 25, or 26,
Yeah,
or 27.
27, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, one
so
of
think
those
about,
five.
but so if you take a
Maybe
19-year-old in the OHL or CHL or whatever, physically they're probably pretty similar when they're 24 in terms of height, weight, like
yeah, they're not going to get taller
right.
necessarily.
Not
If they
necessarily going
do,
to put
it's
on a
like
ton
not
more
much.
weight or
Yeah,
anything.
but the obviously the strength is different.
Strength is different, but even maybe not even like because my strength difference between 20 and 24 was not that different. Like what I was doing in the gym.
Where you're working out like real workout, like hockey.
Yeah, like if I just go off raw numbers lifting in the gym
Okay,
when I was
but
19,
there don't you agree? There's something different between lifting and being a human.
yes. My point is you're distracting my point. My point is physically it's not as easy to see the development from let's say 18 to 24, okay? As it is from 10 to 16, obviously. Yes? Growth from 10 to
Yeah,
16,
yeah, yeah,
very
yeah, yeah. Well,
obvious.
yeah.
16 to 20 or whatever 24 is not as obvious, right? Because it's kind of in the mix. But your actual skill set and mental development is a lot, right? It changes a lot from 16 to 24. So when you're watching kids on the ice, it's not as clear. A rookie in the OHL that is 16, their mental game or their skill set development from 16 to 17, 17 to 18, 18 to 19, 19 to 20 is still huge. Whereas their physical growth isn't quite as large. So it's like it's not as obvious how much better they're getting year over year because the physical element isn't there to see.
I see what you mean.
You
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying? So same thing from you get a guy that goes to their first pro camp when they're 19, 20, whatever. They enter their professional league as a 20-year-old. The difference between them as a player 20 to 24 is night and day probably for most guys, you know? That's kind of like part of the college, like the NCAA argument. It's like you have this runway to get to that prime years or those prime years of 24 where that physical development is still there in the gym and you're maturing, right? You're still maturing, but how you play the game is much different from 20 to 24, even though you might look like the same kind of person physically, right? Like the eye test isn't quite as different, but from a skill set standpoint, a mental development standpoint, maturity, judgment on how to do things, that's where I think the big improvements happen. And maybe because it's not so obvious to see because of it's not physical growth necessarily. It's not as clear that that's actually what's happening. So when you talk about, the difference between having a young team in the OHL and an older team in the OHL, I think a lot of times it can come down to those things that you don't see as clearly, right? Like so, like Charlie's a good example. Like when he's first year in the OHL, like his size he might be what is he maybe 10 pounds different, right? He was almost the same
Yeah.
height, almost the same weight
10, 15 pounds different.
because he started
Half an inch. He's
Yeah, right?
6'2" now. He was 6'1" ish.
So he's like not a ton different physically, right? But his maturity level is a lot different, and how he can judge plays is a lot different. So I think that's kind of
The difference though is that little you don't even that baby face going in at 16. Now
Yeah.
it's not like he grows a full beard either, but like he can get the chinny chin chins
Yeah.
in a week, like in a week.
The
And
chinny
I
chin
love it. Like he
chins.
goes, "Hey, Dad, what do you think? Should I shave?" And I go, "No, like honestly, I'm telling you the truth because of the way you play. Keep the chinny chin chins going because it looks like you're scarier, right? Yeah. So it's funny. I saw a picture of Arbor Jack guy the other day, his first year in the OHL, and it's like, ha! You, dude, you wouldn't. You'd look and you go, "Oh, this little boy, he's not. It's gonna
I
be the
gotta pull
toughest
it.
guy in the league."
I gotta pull it up.
Yeah,
What is it? It's his first year of the OHL.
yeah. I just
Arbor.
go pick up a pic.
How do you spell? By the way, how do
A
you
R
spell
B
this
E
name?
R.
Eh?
It doesn't matter. Just put
Yeah.
Arbor is spelled many different ways. But if you look at his youth pics, it's like he's a little skinny kid, tall skinny kid. He doesn't look like a killer.
Oh yeah.
See what I mean?
Oh wow.
But that's what happens is growth. So, but
holy,
yeah,
that's wild.
yeah. Does he look like he's gonna be fighting in the NHL and killing people? No. But I've got a quote, but I'm gonna bastardize it. But it sums up why about experience. Okay, if you look at someone, if you ask someone, how did you become successful? Just experience. Well, how'd you get experience? Lots of mistakes. Maybe I did it backwards. But basically, you don't become successful without making a lot of mistakes, right? So if you take a hockey player, like how do you become a good hockey player? It's like you don't get experience and you don't become successful by just being good all the time. You make mistakes, right? You learn. That's what I'm saying about a first year player as opposed to a fourth year player is when you get that soft rim on the wall, the first 30 games of your career, see adults, the first 30 games of your career, that rim with a D pinching down and a winger coming down to hammer you comes in fast motion, and it's not the same as doing it in midget and bantam, right? And then you do it for 30 games, 40 games, and you do it in practice. All of a sudden, it slows down, and you learn how to actually even put your hands out, how to protect yourself, how to read the game a little bit, and then all of a sudden you've done that for 1 year, 2 years, and the next thing you know, you can take any rim off the wall. You don't care anymore because it's easy, right? And that's the experience you're talking about. It's not about stick handling through people. It's not about being able to pick corners on shooting. It's the little things in the game that give you experience. Hinging the right way if you're a D, how to support pucks, how to track properly.
Yeah, it is interesting to watch, man.
Yeah,
it's interesting to watch. Even being behind the bench, that's one of the most enjoyable parts about coaching for me is when you see kids start to get that, where they like get it right for the first time at whatever level they're at. It's cool to see that part of the development. So I'm going to start with another controversial post here. So last week, and it is actually, I think it is a good point to kind of clarify or sharpen up because it's something that a lot of people think. We were talking about if you need to play with better players to get better. So one of the clips we had that came out from the last episode was, or 2 episodes ago now, was basically a parent had been saying you have to play with better players to get better. Like it's a necessity to do that. If you don't do that, you can't get better. My point was, okay, how did all these superstar guys, how did they continue to get better if they never had anyone better to play with? So that was your Crosbys, McDavids, yada yada. Yeah. And then there was a whole lot of discussion on this post about the fact that they had played up, right? So between Bedard, McDavid, Crosby, they were always playing up, and it didn't really get to the point that I was trying to make, which for these guys, like McDavid, the example I gave was he U16. I didn't say this in the last episode, but just talking with somebody about it, he played a year up, so he's playing U16 when he was a U15.
Yeah, because he was a 97.
Yeah, so he would have been.
And I coached the 97s in Bell Tire.
Right.
So I was able to watch some of his midget games up when he was with the 96s.
Right. So he had, I think, assuming his stats are right, he had like 200 plus points as a year younger playing U16. Okay. So by far the best player on the ice. Like not even a question. Okay.
Josh Hosang was on his team and skill level was the same.
Okay. So if you take Josh Hosang off his line, is Connor McDavid still the best player on the ice?
He's Connor McDavid.
Okay. This is my point. This is exactly my point. Okay. So if you had to go, even in youth hockey, so if let's say Josh Hosang was the best guy also, they're the top 2. Like, who's better in that U16 year, Hosang or McDavid? From what you remember, would you rather take McDavid on your team or Josh
Well,
Hosang?
like in midget,
Yeah,
we're gonna say they're the same age now. Is that what you mean?
that U16 team,
Yeah.
not at the same age. So Connor is a
Connor's a year
U15
younger.
playing on the Marlies,
Yeah.
and Josh Hosang on the Marlies. Who are
Well,
you going to
okay,
take?
so I didn't watch them enough, obviously.
Okay.
Like I saw them play a few times, and in midget, well, obviously, I think the answer is Connor McDavid.
Okay, so
But I mean, I'm sounding probably stupid
it's
here,
just
but
a thought experiment
yeah,
that I'm doing. I'm not holding you to it here.
yeah.
So my point being,
But I did, just a side note, I did watch both of them play, and Hosang was electrifying, right? Like you saw that with the spits. You take the puck and just go through anybody, do all kinds of stuff. Like he skated, I wouldn't say he skated like McDavid because there's only one like that, but his hands were sick.
Mhm.
Anyways, go.
so let's.
Anyways, I know I digress.
That's okay. So let's
Yeah,
still assume that like Connor McDavid is better
yeah.
than Josh
Yeah.
Hosang. So
Yeah.
Josh Hosang is still really good, right? He's still really, really good. But Connor's better. So if we follow the logic of my argument, it's that Connor is on the ice with all players that are not as good as him. That's the logic, right? So the point that I was making is that if these guys are unable to find better players to play with, because Connor McDavid, as a year younger, still had 210 points, then how are these guys supposed to get better if they can't find any players that are better to play with? And so even though they played up, even though Gretzky played up, even though Crosby played up, they were still the best guys on the ice. So they're still not playing with better players, right? They're the best players still. Right. They're playing with older players. Okay. So they're trying to bridge the gap a little bit because that's how they're trying to bridge the gap of how much better they are, but they're still the best one. Okay. So the point of what I was saying is that if they can't play with anyone better, how are they supposed to get better? So if you take the extreme examples out, who's like a really good minor hockey player that didn't play up, like did Taylor Hall play up? No. So let's take a guy like Taylor Hall. Okay. He's the number one pick
Zach
in the
Cassian
OHL.
was good.
Sure.
He
So
played.
if I take Hall because he was a first overall
Okay.
pick, right? He was OHL first overall, or was he
No.
second?
Third, second, fourth.
He wasn't first overall.
No, O'Reilly was.
Really? Okay. So if I take a guy like Taylor Hall, let's say, he never played up. Maybe he did, but let's just say he didn't. Really good player. Probably the best guy on the ice most of the places that he played, right? How does he get better if he can't find better guys to play with, not playing up? So if we take out the playing up argument, how is he supposed to get better? So the gist of what we're saying is that you don't have to, right? It's not that we were saying it's bad to play up or it's bad to play with better players. Obviously, that's not what we're saying. It's good to do that. But for people that get really hung up on, I need to play with better players, it's just you don't need to. And another example I gave, like I was just talking to a kid today, and she was saying, well, don't you have to train with better players? Like, isn't that what you have to do to get better? And this was not in the context of this conversation. It was like a separate conversation. And I was like, well, you don't have to. Like, it's good when you can. And if you have that opportunity to do it, then sure. Right. But if I take a house league level player and I put him on the ice in an NHL game, is that going to make him better because he's playing with better players? Right. I'm using like extreme examples to illustrate the point. Right. It's not necessarily better to just always be playing with better players. Right. So it's like they've talked about this in terms of skill development, how you want to spend a certain percentage of your time with people equal to you, a certain percentage with people worse than you, and a certain percentage with people better than you, right? And that's the best way to balance out your development of skills. And I notice this, like even if I do something like jiu-jitsu, if I go against somebody that crushes me all the time, I can never practice what I'm learning because I just get mauled the whole time, right? So I'm looking for a white belt guy that I can go roll against here and there so that I can actually practice one of the moves I've learned, you know? So it can't just be always guys that are better than you. And I think this is a common line that a lot of parents buy into, and a lot of these people that throw out these, you know, elite this, elite that, I want to play in this elite thing, and they get caught up on the fact that it's going to be all better players and they're going to play up. Or we've had this where we'll have a certain camp that's labeled for a certain demographic of players, and then people are like, well, can my kid come and play up in that camp? It's like, no, it's not for you. Like you're not
It's
at
not
that
for
level.
you because if you come to this camp and you're the drill buster now because you can't.
You're not at the level.
Right, you're not at the level, then you're a drill buster now. People don't like you
So people fight to get
unless
into
unless you're just good.
Yeah, and people fight to get into that, to get that opportunity, which is, it's not a bad thing to do to play with better guys, But if you think that's what's going to be the make or break factor of you being a good player, getting to the next level, or whatever, it's just not true. It's just not true. And it's not even necessarily better for your own development to go play with guys that are better than you all the time, which is what we were saying, all the time, right? Sometimes it's fine to do that. Like, I'm not saying it's bad to play with better guys. I did it. If you play junior, you're playing with better guys, right? If you're an average junior player, which I was an average junior player. I was playing with guys that were better than me a lot in junior, and that made me better. So it's like, I'm not saying it's not a good thing to do, but it's getting caught up on, my kid has to go to this thing because it's better players, and they're only going to go on the ice with players that are better than them, right? I know you've heard about this. Like, people say this to you all the time, and have said this to you all the time, where they're fighting to get on the ice with better guys, and it's just not something that you have to always be doing, right?
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's the thing. People use the example of I love it when people use Sidney Crosby didn't do that. Connor McDavid. They use the best players that ever played in the history of the world, and it doesn't matter what those guys did because they're the best players in the world. You don't just work and do everything right to become the best player in the world. You're just the best player in the world. You know, there's talent, work, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's something that you can't explain. You just happen to be really good at hockey, right? No matter how much I practice singing, I'll never be good at singing. Right? Doesn't matter how
You're
many
pretty
things.
good at singing.
I am actually pretty good. Right? So my point to that is when people use examples of McDavid this and this NHL guy this, it's like even so even if you look at like a true OHL, like a CHL player, someone that plays like 3, 4, 5 years of OHL and has a good solid career, like they're good hockey players. They're kids that they're not kids that if they didn't play a year up or didn't train with the right person or didn't do this, no, they're going to play in the OHL because they're really good at hockey. It's the kids that really have to struggle, maybe late bloomers, maybe other things that they're the ones that have to like to get to the OHL or get to college. It's like it's pure work and they got to try to make as many right moves as they can. But like the players that are just really good are just really good. And I could find you anywhere on the planet someone that plays in the NHL or college or the OHL that came from that were first round picks or full ride scholarships or whatever that came from a big city, from a small city. They're tall, they're short, they're out of shape. All the anomalies that you can think of. They played AAA. They didn't play AAA. They had an outdoor rink and that's where they did all their work, or they had private lessons their whole life. And that's what they did. It's like the bottom line is that the best players, and what I mean by the best players, I don't mean Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, and Bedard, because what I mean the best players are the players that play junior college pro. They're really good players that worked hard. It's not they did everything perfectly right, and without that they wouldn't make it. So that's the first thing I would say is like there's not a recipe for because my point to that is like if you came from Saskatchewan and you played in a farm town. I mean, it's a lot different now, but if you played in a small town like from out west and um, you don't have private lessons and you can't really move up a year or whatever the case is, it's like it is what it is, and there's still first round picks and NHL players and college players that come from there, right? You could take the kids from Toronto and the biggest Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton, the big cities in Canada, and they could all play AAA on the best leagues in that area, Detroit, whatever. And there's a certain way that they do things, but it's like to say that you have to be at the best players is not necessarily true, and it's not necessarily false. So what I would say to that is like life has changed. So like for example, when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, no, 70s is when I was a kid, right? So my playing days would have been till I got drafted in 1985. So 75 to I was 4 or 5 years old. 75 to 85 I played hockey. And back then there was not all these strict rules you had to go you had to be like the perfect human to get to brought up to another level. Like you got to go through the boards. You got to go. People have to say yes. We'll allow this kid to play 1 year up. Like it's a major deal in life. But when I played hockey, I played. When I started hockey, I was 4, and I played atom hockey, so the kids are up to 9. We didn't have face masks, so I probably wasn't a very good hockey player at 4, right? So I played that for a whole bunch of years. So you could say, well, you played up then. It's like, yeah, I did, but it wasn't like great hockey. And then when as we moved up the ladder, I could always jump up to AAA. I could play on the major. I could always skip to the major team. And then when I got to Bantam, I played on the minor Bantams. I played some games with the major Bantams. I played some games with the minor midgets, and I played some games with the major midgets. So I played on 4 different teams, not every night. So like, was it beneficial to me? Like, yeah, it was good in the sense that I got to play with like not. I didn't find it any different because I was a good hockey player, so I could be a chameleon, and I was a great passer, and I could just play the game real well, score goals, and I just did what I did, even though they were 3 years older. The only difference to me was like blending in. Not no, the only difference to me was that they were bigger, and I didn't know the kids. But once I got on the ice and played, I didn't care. There's no benefit. It was the same thing. It was hockey. Why was it? Why was there no difference to me? Because I was a good hockey player. Now, if I was not a very good hockey player, that would have been a real hard struggle, right? So, but anyways, back then you could just go and play up, so there was never an issue. Any NHL guy or any guy that you talk with that is roughly my age. So I was born in 1969. So any time in that era, it was almost unheard of a good hockey player didn't play up. But we played with our own age group as well, and we never even thought about the benefits. We didn't do it for the benefits. We just like to play hockey. Today, like I said earlier, it's like you need a license to go out and play with kids older because it's a big deal in society. In the hockey world, it's like you need permission from everybody, and they make it such a big deal. So I think that maybe what gives it um, um, that like it's such a like, I don't know what the word is, but they make it such a big deal. Like it really shouldn't be. So, but you don't have to play with the best players to get better, but you can, right? So it's like so to argue, like you can argue it both ways too, right? So when an NHL team drafts you, for example, or a junior team drafts you, an OHL team drafts you, CHL, they draft you and you're not quite ready for that league. They put you in a league. Let's say in the OHL, they put you with. So if you get drafted to the London Knights, but you're not quite ready for that league yet, or you might be just on the cusp of getting ice, but they don't. They think we want you to season. They send you to Junior B, and you play for the London Nationals, or you play for one of the teams at their Junior B level. And typically, what those kids do that go there, they're playing with older guys, but they're better than most of those guys because they're first round picks in the OHL, second round picks, and they go to the Junior B like it's nothing, right? So is that the argument of, well, are you playing with better players? Well, no, like you're better than most of them. So what about the kid that goes to the NHL drafted, and let's use Callum Ritchie this year, or let's use Shane Wright from a couple years ago, and people are going to start making comments like, I mean, whatever, it doesn't matter. But let's use those guys: Shane Wright, Callum Ritchie, um, whoever else you want to say that was sent down from their NHL team to go back to the OHL to what? Now there is a rule that you can't the CHL and the American League rules don't allow an NHL team to send you to the American League if you still have junior eligibility. But nonetheless, if the NHL team was so worried about someone's development against playing against people that aren't as good as them, then they would never send Callum Ritchie down to the OHL again because he played some games in the NHL. Clearly, he can play in the NHL to a certain degree, or he's right there. Sending him back to the OHL is obviously not the same level as the NHL. So, are they hurting his development? No, because now you're going out and you're playing where you can dominate the puck. You get more puck touches. You're making plays. You're on the ice all the time, and that's a good thing. I think people forget sometimes that when you are the best person on the ice or the close to the best person on the ice all the time, what happens is you gain confidence, and you can never gain, like, just take my son for example. The amount of ice he gets now compared to his first 2 years is it's invaluable. And yes, when you get on the ice and you're touching the puck, guess what happens? You get confident, and you get to be maybe more creative, or you get to know yourself a little bit better than when you're fighting to get that ice, right? And so it's good to be the best guy on the ice sometimes. And on the flip side, it's great to be challenged with guys that are better than you. And it's just It is what it is. But when you go to the OHL, I mean, you're gonna find if you get to the OHL, you're very, 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 very seldom you're gonna walk into that league and be the best player on the ice. So you're gonna be challenged with that anyways, right? You know. So, anyways, at every level, I don't know if this is actually addressing what your question is, but you can make the argument either way. But at the end of the day, really, really, really good hockey players, um, really, really good hockey players are the ones that make it, provided they work. It's even the guys. Some guys they're just talented and they make it. You know what I mean? Like good hockey players are the ones that get there, and what determines that, I don't know. But and I would just go to say one more last thing on that is that you could tell good hockey players. I shouldn't say this all the time, but um, you could tell who the good hockey players are. They stick out like a sore thumb. Like if the guy's gonna play in the NHL or junior OHL hockey, you could probably tell what they look like. And I always go back to this, like years ago when my kid was playing Select Seven, or was it Novice or something like that. We're in a tournament. We're watching the Newmarket, whatever their last name was, or I think they're Newmarket Redmond. One of Charlie's teammates at the time was Chase Coughlin. We had dinner with his parents, and I said, "You played for Newmarket." I said, "I watched you guys play in June or Novice." I said, "Who's the kid?" They said, "It's Denver Barkey." I said, "I didn't answer. I didn't get a chance to say what I wanted to say." They said, "No, Denver Barkey was the best out there." And I said, "Well, yeah, he was." Like, and it's not like that goes against the argument that we always say is like it doesn't matter what you are when you're 6 or 9 or 10, but when you look like that, I always said to my wife, I said that kid will be a hockey player, provided he continues to grow. But like the way he skated, and he already moved the puck well, and you could see him create plays, and he was really nice skater, playmaker, and it's like okay, they stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I think I mean, people that actually listen to when we speak about things, there's always the two sides, right? And I think for this thing, like I said, that we had that episode a long time ago. It was like about there's no recipe, man, because people want to find the thing they need to do, and it's like you can find somebody that did everything exactly to your point. Whatever recipe you want to follow, you'll find somebody that did it that way. You know?
And then going into, like you mentioned, jujitsu, but remember reading George St. Pierre's book how when they train for fights, and most guys do this when they train for fights, they do train. Um, they'll find someone in a discipline that's better than them. So, like, say your striking is not as good as your jujitsu, so they'll get someone that's a better striker, so you get used to it. But then they also put themselves in the ring closer to the fight, where they're in situations where they're always winning. It's a lot easier to win because you want the mindset to be like I win, not struggle all the time and doubt yourself, right? So
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's my thing. Obviously, I don't think anyone thinks I was saying it's not good to play with better players. Um, but yeah, no, it's interesting. There's a lot of different elements to that
well,
discussion
the
that I think
thing
is
is, like, what
helpful.
are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? This is the part. This is the problem I have with youth hockey and stuff. It's like if you don't have, like, I'm changing gears a little bit here, but if you don't have a ton of money, you can't go and play for the best organization and travel all over the place if you don't have money. So is that kid denied being a hockey player? Like, no, you can still play hockey and you can still be really good at it. If um, There's a lot of situations where you just you can't move up if you live in a certain spot of the in the province or whatever. I was talking to someone the other night. They live in the States. They called me for a consultation, and they said they want to play here. They want to play here. The kid is 14 now, right? I want to play here and I want to play here. I want to play here because it's this. I want to play here on the this Detroit team because it's like one of the best. What do I do? And we live in the middle. So to go to practice is an hour and a half to 2 hours. And to come home is another hour and a half, 2 hours. So it's like a 6 hour night for practices 3 times a week. So not everybody can do that. So if you live in a certain area, does that mean, well, you have to move the family, which a lot of people do? It's like it doesn't. You don't have to do the crazy ass things.
Yeah.
But if you want to do the crazy ass things,
Yeah.
go do it. Don't go ahead.
Well, I think
You don't have to though.
there's a bit of an illusion that having certain advantages inherently will give you an advantage. So like if you have the advantage of having a particular coach or being on a particular team or living in a particular place or doing whatever thing, fill in the blank, that will mean you get X. and it doesn't always mean you get X, you know? And so I think that's part of the deal too, is you can get sucked into that, well, if I go here, that's better. And maybe it is better, but maybe it's not better, because you can find the example of, like we said, of every kid that did every single different thing. And for some people it was good, for some people it wasn't good. And so it just is going to depend on what works well for you. And if you try something this year that works really well and you do the exact same thing next year, it might not work well next year, just because things are different. So situations are different. It's a different day of the week. It's a different setup slightly or whatever. So it's like it's not just the one thing, you know, it's not one particular advantage that is just going to mean you get everything you want. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
So one thing that you can also look at, this would piss some people off, and it's the reality though, is that you look at every level, right? So if you look at AAA hockey, for example, pick a team, doesn't matter. You've got your best players that the coaches and the team really want, and you've got the guys that you have to have. And the guys that you have to have are paying the bills, like, right? Because so you look at let's just say whatever Toronto team or whatever, like how hockey's run now, it's like it's about winning half the time, right? So like if you're my number one centerman, Eric, then you're gonna get power play, you get penalty kill, and parents, you can shut up, just shut up, because you want to be on this team and be a AAA player on the best Toronto team or Detroit, whatever. Then you're gonna have to deal with it, and parents deal with it. They go, okay, well, we'll take the crumb minutes that you're willing to give us, coach, right? And then maybe we'll look for a different team next year. So you're paying the same amount of money. So if I'm like the third line centerman, you're the first line centerman, and you get more ice, like I'm funding, as parents, I'm funding your ice. It should be like kind of should be somewhat resemble equal, like roughly, right? But it's not the way it goes. So like you got and then if you leave and you go on another team and you say, well, it'll be better there, and it's the same thing sort of happens. Like we the hockey needs those people so that we could have the AAA, because in reality, like even you look at the Ontario Hockey League draft, there's only 300 guys that get drafted in all of Ontario per year. It's 200 and some, right? So it's like they're 230, I think. So it's like not everybody like that plays AAA could be is actually there. But then you go to the OHL, right? And there's no OHL if we don't have fourth line, third line guys. What we're really there for is to produce, like, let's just use Guelph for example. Is Luchenko is a first round pick. Like, let's get him. Like, I'm not. This is not a card by it. I'm just being realistic. He's one of the best players in the league. Get him on the ice, and it's like get him on the ice. Get him on the ice. Like the fourth liners and the third liners, which our kid was one at that one time, are providing an area for this guy for your stars to play. Without them, or without the guys, the support staff, you don't have a team. But like ultimately, you're
trying to send a few guys off.
You're there for these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to the NHL, it's the same thing. Like if you look at the pay structure of the NHL, it's like like you look at McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman make, I don't know what the number is, but let's say they make 50% of the payroll, maybe more actually. You guys are just here to you guys are just here to support them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true, man.
So it's like,
that's an interesting way
when
to
you
think
look
about
at it, it's like, okay, so when you're running around as a parent, you're sitting there going, okay, I want to give my kid opportunities, but like, am I giving them opportunities, or am I making this a place where someone else can have success? Meaning that kid there, like, am I funding his hockey development?
And
you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does. It's an interesting way of thinking about it, because I've never really thought of it that way.
Because like when I watch my kid grow up, it's like, okay, it's very obvious who the players are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Andrew Gibson was on the team. Charlie Jerv, they were OHL players.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's like you guys are funding. I'm not being an asshole because you want your kid to play hockey, but you're funding my kids.
That's what it is. There's no team
players
without you.
without
no
them,
team,
you're funding
right?
my kids.
And that's the thing, is when people do all this crazy shit, and that's why it's so interesting to people like us who work in the space, and we have these conversations, and we know a lot about what the results are of like where kids actually are going to go, who's going to get there, and the numbers of what that actually is. And then we see like some of the behaviors of kids talking about their, their local hockey. Like people are freaking out about this thing with the borders, like the open border stuff, because what's that going to be for this organization and that organization? And then we come to it with this a little bit more global perspective of like we see what is actually going to happen, and like it doesn't really matter that much anyways, guys, because there's only going to be so many guys that make it professionally. So what are we doing? Like what are we actually doing here, and so I haven't thought of it that way, and that's actually an interesting way to think about it for parents if you're you know, asking some of these questions and deliberating on what you're doing and what you're paying for and all this stuff. It's like realistically, it's like this is what we're talking about. So do what works for your family and what works for your lifestyle, and you don't really have to make it too much more than that. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I had one more piece that probably won't take too long, and then we can wrap her up. Is I've been I've been increasingly observing. Just so we were in Dallas on the weekend, okay, and we had a clip years ago of you talking about the cost of hockey, okay? And you were saying like when you played Bell it's like you'd play here and then you were in Boston and then you would look at this team from LA or whatever and you'd be like, how did you get across the country like 3 weekends in a row or whatever, right? And so
Yeah.
I
So
was
let me just clean it up.
go ahead.
So it was. There's. I guess there's no other way, or maybe there is. But we would be in Detroit, and we'd be hosting a showcase or a tournament, right? And you'd see, your first time you say, okay, you're playing Los Angeles Junior Kings, the Colorado Eagles, and the Dallas Elite or Stars Elite, and the Boston Advantage, and you go, okay, well, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Like these kids came to Detroit for a tournament. That's cool. Then we'd go to, maybe it would be the next weekend. It would be in Boston or Cleveland, or we would do our showcase somewhere else, and then we would see LA's there again. What? They just last weekend were in Detroit. And like when I look at the map, it's like LA is way on the west coast, and it's south. And they came, and I'm like, wow. And then Dallas again, and Florida or whatever. And I'm like, okay. And then we'd see it 3, 4, 5 times a year. I'm like, how did you do this? Because I was sitting there going like, you just went across the country, and I know it's not $40 to bring a whole team. Like, how do you do it?
So
I digress.
right, so now we are said team. Here we go, full circle 3 years later. And it's not that bad. We had one that was really our only real far one. So we were in Dallas, and I'm watching. My point is not about the cost necessarily, though it's worth noting. But I'm looking at just what these kids have available to them, and I don't. They just don't know what they have. They just don't know what they have. Like they don't have a good grasp on what their parents are providing them by allowing them and paying for them to do this stuff. They don't have a good concept of taking advantage of the ice that they're on or taking advantage of the off ice that they have or the different resources that we have here. Like I'm watching, like I gave the example a few weeks ago and again this weekend of just like we do nutrition class every week and guys are eating gummy bears and whatever on before the game kind of stuff. And I'm just like reflecting on it, like they just aren't taking advantage of what opportunity they have, and I don't know if there's a way to increase that or get them to realize it, or is it that philosophy of just we're throwing mud at the wall and hoping something sticks, and maybe it'll click for them at some point and just keep providing, keep providing, keep providing until somebody realizes it. Or is it something that's inherent to some kids that will grasp it and some kids that won't? Or like how do you increase the amount of kids that really take it seriously or take advantage, not even seriously, just take advantage of the resource that they have? Or is that an unbreakable law that some kids are just gonna you'll have your very small percentage of kids that really take advantage of it. You'll have a group in the middle that are like kind of meh, and then you'll have a group of kids that just don't care about anything. And I'm really thinking about that a lot because of what we have here now, the program that we have, and how much we actually can offer some of these people and the dollar, like the actual value they get per dollar being here. And it's like just some of the kids aren't capitalizing on it. And is that something that we can break and try to get more kids into that upper echelon of caring, or is that just an unbreakable thing that you can't really combat? And it's like, I don't know if that's a question or just a
Well,
thought,
it's
or
an
like, what are you,
observation
what
and a
are,
question. It's an observation and it's a question. And I think the longer you live life, you can just come up with an opinion. I have zero scientific basis for anything I'm going to say. All I can look at as I could use my life experience as a human. I think I'm a human. Okay. As a hockey player, as a hockey coach, as a hockey dad, as a all whatever things I am. And I look at like my first initial thing is like you could what most people would say, yeah, kids are just spoiled now. And I would say, yeah, but that's relative. I kids have so much right now that um I don't know if they could ever appreciate it. What we have here. I don't think a guy that lives with a dad that played in the NHL really appreciates what his dad could offer him. I know my son appreciates a lot and he shows a lot, but then there's times where he just goes, "Okay," and then it always comes back to like what I said was actually important. But it's like, yeah, but your dad. And then after he goes, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So let's just go back in time, right? When people played hockey, everyone played on an outdoor rink, right? Then certain teams and certain leagues, cities started to build rinks and stuff like that. So you were like, do you think the people, if you played in an indoor rink all the time now, do you think you would appreciate that instead of having to be outside all the time? Well, no, you get used to it. You just go, okay, this is where I play hockey. Or when I was playing hockey, it was indoor rink, so I'm not, of course, like I'm not 112, right? But I remember going to tournaments and we play the Toronto Marlies. Like we had socks and my first couple of years it was socks and jerseys that matched. So if you had red pants with your blue and black whatever jersey, oh well. We'll go play the Toronto Marlies, the Toronto whatever. You didn't have to be Toronto to have it, but they had matching everything plus bags plus, and I'd be like, can you imagine? It's like being a pro. Do you think those kids thought anything like it was a big deal? Right? They might have had a really good coach, and then some kids had I don't know. You move on, and it got better and better, and then you had good organizations, and with a good, then it gets to the point where you have a place where you have your gym. I'm talking about this, a gym. BioSteel is here to sponsor you and to make a great experience. You have great teachers. You got a really good coaching staff. You're on the ice 5 days a week, 4 days a week minimum. A training program, they're not gonna. They don't appreciate it. They like it, you think, but it's like if you get familiar, right? It's the same thing as playing hockey. When people go and they're on the ice every day, or they play spring hockey to regular hockey to this, and they're on the ice all the time. It's like you don't really appreciate hockey. You're just going to the next one, and you get used to every environment you have. So the question, my opinion on your question or your comment is, I think it always will come down to some people get it and some people don't. Some people want it, some people won't. Some will, some won't. So what? Um, I I I don't know if people can appreciate it. See, because when I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money. My dad was a butcher. Then he wasn't a butcher. He did something else, and it was like he was a loan provider. Then he went out for ice cream. Then he never came back. Right? It was like, "Where's the ice cream, Dad?" It was 12 months ago. Anyways, but we didn't have a lot of money, so I say this to this day. I've said it to so many people. I didn't care about the car we drove. I didn't care if we had great food at home. I didn't care about one thing. I love my brothers. Didn't care about one thing. All I cared about was I got to play hockey. So I'm one of those guys that appreciated hockey. I loved it every single day. I can tell you, and people tell you they caught a fish this big, but then they tell you it's this big. That wasn't me. I loved hockey. So I would be fuming pissed if someone picked me up for practice, like because we had these 7 o'clock in the morning practices every Saturday. Mr. Rose set them up, And I sometimes my mom was able to give me a ride. Most times I have to get a ride. And sometimes I'd call this one guy who was a goalie who would pick me up at around 6:15 to get us to downtown. And I knew if we can get there at 6:30, I'd get all my gear on. All I had to do when I got to the rink is tie my skates on, and I could get out there and I could get half an hour by myself. Another guy would pick us up at 6:30, and so if Mr. Chisholm couldn't pick me up, then I'd have to call this guy, and I'd be like pissed because that's 15 more minutes of ice. That's how I did
Yeah.
it. So, and I
Yeah.
would do the call. My mom didn't call and say, "Can I have a ride?" I'd have to make the call. And I was so excited about every ice. And I wanted to get on the ice and I practiced and I loved every second of it. Mr. Rose would take us upstairs and make us run, do plyos. I didn't appreciate it as much as I really should have, but I did it, and I did it because he was my coach and I wanted to respect him. I wanted to do it my best, right? But I loved hockey. Other guys could not, they'd come to the rink, tired. How can you be tired for hockey practice? I don't care what time in the morning it was. If 6:30, 7 o'clock practice in the morning for me was like, are you kidding me? I don't sleep. I'm excited, right? Other kids would walk in like, oh my God, it's early in the morning. And it's like, well, you don't love hockey, right? And that's what you see here as I'm making that comparison is they get on the ice every day and some kids are here and ready to go. Most kids are here because 8:30 in the morning I'm practicing. I sit here and I go, are you nuts? What do you mean? How can this be negative in any way? I'm tired. I'm sore. If this was my life, I would never have missed one day of school in my life. Never. I would have loved school. No, really. I'm
Yeah.
not even trying to be funny. I would have missed one day of not one day of school. I would have came here maimed.
Yeah.
I would have, I would, seriously, I could be puking. There's no way I would miss school if I had hockey in the morning. Right. And but that's not everybody. And that's the thing. You either love it or you don't. And if you love the game and you love getting better or whatever you want to say, you're just not going to teach that, right? So I think the hardest thing to I think just in society is like when you are just given things, and I'm not saying this because they're spoiled. And some are for sure. But the more you're around stuff and the more you get stuff, the less you appreciate it, right? So I think that's probably half the battle, and then you either just really love it or you really don't. And if you really love it, and then you will appreciate it. And then if you have this part could be on parents, and I will say that probably is. I'm just trying to think of an example we had the other day. Anyways, when there's a part that the parents play into helping them appreciate it, or maybe showing them that what you have, right? And if it's called respect, it's called whatever, and explaining, edifying the people that you should be edified, meaning build up the people that should be built up. So like if I was, well, I do it with my son. I do it with my son. He's gonna be a pro. Like he plays in the OHL, man. And when we talk in the summer, if we ever talk and we say, hey, how was your coach, whatever, and I go, so he said something, a couple things last night. I said, Charlie, that's a big compliment, man. Big compliment coming from your coach. And because you get used to him, right? Guy won 2 Stanley Cups. He's telling you good things about what you are doing and correcting you on things that you couldn't be. I'm like, it doesn't get any better. You got a guy you're talking about scoring goals, and he's showing you some things. It's like absorb it, and like But if I don't tell him like your coach is like I can help you. There's no one more experienced than this guy. He might never know. Might not really care, right? And I mean, that's an extreme. But as you're growing up in life, it's like when you're raising your kids, I think it's really important to show them what they should appreciate. Do you know what I mean? What they should appreciate, what they should appreciate. And it's like, it could be as simple as, I always said this to people, and tell it to almost every group that I ever have. I go, one of my rules is that you're going to work hard. And number two is you're going to have respect, because the respect thing pisses me off. And I always said that if my son came home at school, even though he hated school, if you come home with a D in a class, that's one thing. I can deal with a D. We could sit there and say, okay, did you try? Well, I did. Okay, you didn't. right? Well, but if you did and you proved to me that you did, it's like you just didn't understand it then, right? And then if he goes, well, and then you realize, oh no, he's just dumb, right? You're just a dumb kid, right? Or you didn't try. It's an effort, but you can pinpoint D, right? You can pinpoint what's the D. I might be able to help you with some, or we could default to you're an idiot. No, it's true. It could be like you're mentally challenged. You don't know 2 plus 2. It's a twister here, but or whatever, right? And that's okay, because then we could navigate through life a different way. Maybe you have to work with your hands. Maybe you have to think about things a different way. Maybe we need to teach you how to solve problems with a tutor or something, and you're going to work through it, right? But the disrespect thing is a whole different thing. And I said, what if you ever came home and the note or the phone call or the whatever that your kids were very disrespectful or they did something disrespectful in class, then it's like World War III. You can't disrespect people that are in, even sometimes that even if they didn't earn your respect, they are your teacher, they are your coach, they are there is a certain amount of respect you have for them. If you're disrupting other people's lives in class, in the on the ice, whatever it is, it's like that's a no-no. So I think as parents, I think it's very important that we teach those kind of basics, so that when things that should be appreciated are, or at least you have a chance to appreciate it, or you do get a grasp of things, I think it's good to show examples of people of without shoving it down their throats, but like showing examples of commitment, showing examples of people that do things the right way, and then I think your children have more of a chance to emulate that or to appreciate it or to understand those qualities. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, I do for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all. That's good shit, man.
Yeah.
Was enthralled
Yeah.
by your conversation there.
Yeah.
I have to stop, but I wanna maybe pick up on this next week because there's a lot of good threads there about um that idea of just like taking advantage of opportunities and kind of what that means. And there's like bunch of different ways we can go on it. And I think it all starts kind of with that, what you're talking about, the root of that, with your parents trying to get you to appreciate things that should be appreciated. And there's like some subjectivity there on what you should appreciate and shouldn't. But like generally, I think there's some principles that basically apply to everything. So maybe we'll pick it up on that one next week. So yeah, I gotta cut it there. Okay, dude. Sounds good. Ciao.